This wasn't just an injury, and this wasn't just a coaching mistake. What happened to Caitlin Clark was a betrayal. It was a calculated risk, a $370 million gamble made by an organization that got scared. And tonight, we have the leaked numbers and the inside story to prove it. For weeks, fans have been asking the right questions, but the Indiana Fever have been giving all the wrong answers. They want you to believe this was all just a tragic accident, an unlucky moment in a long season. But the evidence tells a very different story. A story of negligence, a story of a franchise that prioritized money over the health of its superstar, and a story of a betrayal that could ultimately push Caitlin Clark out of Indiana for good. The incident itself is now infamous. It was June 24th, 2025. The Fever were in Seattle playing the Storm. The game was, for all intents and purposes, over. The Fever held a secure 8-point lead with a mere 16 seconds left on the clock. Most star players, especially one already showing signs of fatigue, would have been on the bench celebrating a solid road win. But Caitlin Clark was not on the bench. For reasons that defy all basketball logic, she was sent back onto the court.
As you can see with this play here, she gets a handoff from Aliyah Boston, and then she fumbles the ball a little bit and she falls to the ground.
What happened next was as predictable as it was devastating. Clark receives a handoff from her teammate Aliyah Boston. She fumbles the ball slightly, lunges to recover it, and then it happens.
You can see in her face that she was screaming. She was like, ah, not necessarily screaming, but yelling, right? And boom, she falls over, get the ball, she's getting up. And as she gets up and Erica Wheeler is checking on her, she ended up grabbing her groin right here, all right? So yeah, of course, this is what started that groin injury.
There was no hard foul, no collision with another player. It was a non-contact injury, a sudden, sharp overextension of her left leg that sent her crumbling to the floor. Her face, contorted in a grimace of pain, told the whole story. As she limped off the court, clutching her left groin, one question echoed from the stands to social media. The same question that the Indiana Fever organization has been desperately trying to avoid ever since. Why was the face of the league their greatest asset even in the game at all? The answer, it turns out, is far more cynical than anyone could have imagined. To understand the depth of this betrayal, you first have to understand a critical fact. The Indiana Fever had every reason to know this was coming. The injury on June 24th wasn't a sudden event. It was the final, predictable domino to fall after a series of massive red flags that the organization chose to ignore. Let's talk about the numbers, because they don't lie. In the 3-game stretch leading right up to and including that Seattle game, Caitlin Clark was playing arguably the worst basketball of her entire career. She made only one single 3-point shot. Think about that. The greatest shooter the women's game has ever seen went 1 for 23 from beyond the arc over 3 games. That's a rate of just over 4%. Her scoring average plummeted to just 12 points a game on an abysmal 27.7% shooting from the field. That isn't a slump. For a player of her caliber, that's a statistical cry for help.
People are saying that Caitlin Clark got injured.
As Clark's back in.
Right there.
Down.
All right, on that play that just happened, that it may be where the injury transpired.
But you didn't even need a stat sheet to see something was terribly wrong. You just needed to use your eyes. Fans, reporters, and analysts had all pointed it out. Caitlin had been playing with her upper left leg, heavily taped for multiple games.
Caitlin Clark effect seems to be crazier than year one.
I love watching her score and just everything about her.
They went the extra mile just to watch her play here.
This is great news for women's basketball, period.
Caitlin Clark is the GOAT.
She signed my jersey. So happy, I'm crying. I'm so happy. This is the best day ever.
Caitlin Clark is the needle mover.
She wasn't moving with her usual fire. The explosive energy was gone. She was visibly limping at times. Fans on social media were already sounding the alarm for days, saying something was clearly wrong with Clark. The warning signs weren't just there, they were screaming. The fans saw it. The media saw it. The entire basketball world saw it. So the question becomes, how? How did the Indiana Fever, the very organization tasked with managing and protecting their franchise player, claim to see nothing at all? they didn't miss it. The simple and frankly infuriating answer is they saw the signs and then they publicly pretended they didn't. When the organization was finally forced to face the media, instead of transparency, they delivered a masterclass in corporate spin, deflection, and what appears to be outright dishonesty. The public face of this campaign was head coach Stephanie White. As reporters pressed for answers on Clark's status, the official story began to take shape, and it was a story that simply didn't add up. When asked for specifics about the injury, the first line of defense was to be as vague as humanly possible.
WNBA rumors suggest Caitlin Clark will be among the first stars making $1 million annually. The most notable of which is, y'all already know who, the needle mover, Caitlin Clark.
Day to day, a meaningless phrase designed to quiet concern without providing a single shred of actual information. When pressed further, ask specifically what the MRI showed or if it was a strain, the deflection became even more blatant. Coach White's response? You'll have to ask our training staff. An impossible task, of course, as the media has no direct access to the team's medical personnel. It was a clear attempt to shut down the line of questioning.
So in 2024, she averaged 16.5 points per game, 4 assists, 5.5 rebounds. She shot 37% from the field and 31.8% from three. Now, if you look at her preseason in 2025, she only played 2 games in this preseason, and one was against that Brazilian national team. She played 21 minutes. She averaged 14.5 points, 6 assists, 6 rebounds. She shot 52.5% from the field and 50% from three-point range.
Caitlin Clark is the star player of the WNBA.
The most popular woman ever in the WNBA, Caitlin Clark.
But the most stunning moment, the statement that truly reveals the disconnect between the Fever's story and reality, came when a reporter asked if Clark had reported any pain before the injury. Remember, we're talking about a period where she was visibly taped, limping, and playing terribly. Coach White's official answer was a flat no, she didn't. This leaves us with only 2 equally disturbing possibilities. Either the head coach was being deliberately disingenuous with the media, actively covering up the fact that the team knew Clark was hurting, or perhaps even worse, the Fever have fostered a culture so broken that their franchise player, the face of the league, doesn't feel she can be honest with the staff about the pain she's in. Either scenario points to a catastrophic failure of leadership. It's a level of mismanagement that is hard to comprehend until you start to follow the money. To understand the why, you have to understand a phenomenon known as the Clark effect. Caitlin Clark is not just another player on the roster. She is a one-woman economic engine. She is the reason seats are full, the reason merchandise is sold out, and the reason millions more people are tuning in to watch the WNBA. She is, without exaggeration, the most valuable asset in the entire league.
It was 16 seconds on the clock on that inbound play.
Why in the world is she back in the game with 16 seconds left? Over the past 3 games, it is very clear that Caitlin Clark is not feeling like Caitlin Clark. She says, ow, she's kind of limping to the bench. She has only made 1 3-pointer in her last 3 games.
And the Indiana Fever organization was acutely, perhaps even terrifyingly aware of this, because they had already been given a preview of what a world without Caitlin Clark looks like, and it panicked them. Here is the first number the team doesn't want you to think about. When Clark was sidelined earlier in the season for 5 games with the left quad strain, national WNBA broadcasts experienced a 55% drop in viewership. Let that sink in. Not 5%, 55%. That is a catastrophic collapse for a league and its broadcast partners. It's a code red alert that shows that more than half the national audience is tuning in specifically for her. The financial bleeding doesn't stop there. The moment the Fever officially announced Clark was out with this new groin injury, the secondary market for tickets immediately cratered. Prices for their upcoming games reportedly dropped by an average of 42%. 42%. Gone in an instant. So now let's go back to that moment in Seattle. The game is won. Your star player is visibly struggling, but in the back of your mind, you know these numbers. You know that a 55% viewership cliff is waiting for you if she sits. You know that ticket revenue is about to fall off a table. You're thinking about the team's bottom line, your opponent's bottom line, the league's bottom line. Do you make the safe basketball decision, or do you make the risky business decision? Do you roll the dice just to keep the machine running? The Indiana Fever looked at the risk, they looked at the reward, and they chose to gamble. And the numbers we've just revealed are only the beginning of the story. The panic over viewership and ticket sales is just the immediate day-to-day bleeding. The numbers that truly explain the organization's behavior, the figures that keep owners and league executives up at night, are on a completely different scale. Let's talk about merchandise. Thanks to Caitlin Clark, the Indiana Fever aren't just a basketball team. They are a retail giant. Her presence has driven a 756% increase in sales on the WNBA's official online store. Her number 22 jersey became the single top-selling jersey for any draft pick in any sport in the history of the website Fanatics. It sold out in 1 hour. Every game she plays is another opportunity to sell tens of thousands of jerseys, t-shirts, and hats. Every game she sits, that revenue stream slows to a trickle. But even that pales in comparison to the biggest number of all, the number that defines this entire controversy, the franchise valuation. Just before this injury, in June of 2025, Forbes valued the Indiana Fever franchise at $370 million. That makes them the second highest valued team in the entire WNBA. And here is the crucial line from that report. This is the $370 million gamble. This is the betrayal, quantified. When the front office looks at Caitlin Clark, they don't just see a player. They see an asset that has fundamentally transformed the value of their entire company. They see an asset that one expert calculated is responsible for 45% of the WNBA's total broadcast value. So when that asset is struggling, visibly hurt, and at risk of missing time,
this is the most slow-tation of a special. Satine is perspect.
You don't see a person who needs rest. You see a stock price about to plummet, and you make a reckless decision to protect your investment. And if you think this was a one-time error in judgment, you haven't been paying attention, because the Fever have a pattern of behavior when it comes to prioritizing their image over their players. To understand what's happening with Caitlin Clark, you have to look at what the Indiana Fever did just weeks earlier with another one of their stars, veteran DeWanna Bonner. Because this isn't a one-off mistake. It's a playbook. It's a pattern of deception that the organization has already used. DeWanna Bonner, a multi-time All-Star, was a key off-season acquisition for the Fever. But after playing in just 13 games, she was abruptly waived by the team in late June 2025. Prior to her release, Bonner had been away from the team for an extended period, and the organization's official explanation was that she was out for personal reasons. It's a common, respectable phrase used to give a player privacy, but it wasn't the truth, or at least, it wasn't the whole truth. It was widely reported by numerous media outlets that Bonner's absence was actually due to significant internal issues with the team. Reports claimed she had expressed no interest in playing for the team again after her role and playing time had been diminished. Bonner herself even alluded to this on social media, posting a message that read, "Let's just make sure the apologies are just as loud as the disrespect, in due time." Does this sound familiar? A vague, corporate-approved reason given to the public, while a much messier reality plays out behind the scenes. It's the same playbook. Media analysts have explicitly drawn a direct line from the lack of transparency in the Bonner situation to the vague and deflective communications surrounding Clark's injury. The organization has demonstrated a clear pattern of behavior. When faced with a difficult situation, their priority is not transparency, but controlling the public narrative. They established a history of not telling the full story. So when coach Stephanie White stood in front of the cameras and claimed she had no idea Caitlin Clark was in pain, WNBA legend and current analyst Sue Bird was reportedly in attendance at that game in Seattle. She later commented on the situation, and her analysis was a massive warning sign that the Fever chose to ignore. Bird pointed out that Caitlin Clark's incredibly high usage rate, the sheer fact that she has to create almost every single one of her own shots, while also being the primary playmaker responsible for creating shots for all of her teammates, places an enormous and unsustainable physical burden on her.
She is the needle mover.
She is the franchise player.
And she was the MVP.
She is the main draw.
She wasn't the one who was full sprinting down the court.
Caitlin Clark is a rising star in women's basketball. She's pulling in crazy viewership numbers.
She's my role model. I really look up to her.
This wasn't just a casual observation. This was a warning from one of the most respected minds in basketball history. A warning that Clark's workload was pushing her to a breaking point. A warning that her body was going to break down if something didn't change. A warning that the Indiana Fever clearly did not heed. And that brings us to the core medical reality of this situation. The truth the Fever organization is trying to hide behind that meaningless phrase, day to day. A groin injury isn't just a groin injury. Medical professionals classify them by grades of severity. A grade 1 strain is mild, a minor tear that might take 1 to 3 weeks to heal. A grade 2 strain is a more significant partial tear that can take anywhere from 3 weeks to 3 months. And a grade 3 strain, that's a complete rupture of the muscle. It's a serious injury that can take 4 months or more to heal and can even require surgery. The team's day-to-day comment is a deliberate communication strategy designed to obscure this reality. It allows them to avoid answering the most critical question of all: just how severe is the damage that their gamble created? The risk of re-injury is immense if an athlete returns before a muscle has fully healed. Rushing back can turn a grade 1 strain into a chronic, nagging grade 2 or worse. This medical consensus is what makes the Fever's gamble so unbelievably reckless, and it's what makes their subsequent public relations campaign so insulting. With the medical reality so uncertain, every word from the organization was placed under a microscope. And that's when coach Stephanie White, in an attempt to do damage control, made things exponentially worse. Before a highly anticipated game against the Dallas Wings, a game many fans bought tickets for specifically to see Clark play, the coach issued what she framed as an apology. Here are her exact words, quote, "I'm sorry for the people who are coming. I think I feel a disappointment for them more than anything. I hate that for fans, but at the same time, for us as a team and for Caitlin as a person and player, her health and wellness is the priority." Now, listen to those words very carefully. It was a Freudian slip that revealed everything. The apology was not for Caitlin Clark for putting her in a position to get hurt. It was not an admission of a coaching error. The apology was directed at the fans, the people who bought tickets. In a moment of supposed contrition, the coach's primary focus was the fans' diminished entertainment experience and the box office revenue. Then came the line that shattered any credibility the organization had left. Her health and wellness is the priority. How can her health possibly be the priority when you put her on the court, already hobbling with 16 seconds left in a decided game? How is it the priority when the entire world could see she was struggling for days, yet her minutes remained sky high? The actions and the words are in direct, undeniable contradiction. Fans heard this contradiction loud and clear. For many, this so-called apology was the final straw.
Why do you like Caitlin?
She's so good at basketball.
Because she's that awesome person and she has like a lot of aura, so like...
This is no longer just about one bad decision in one game. It's about a fundamental breakdown of trust between a player, a fiercely protective fan base, and the very organization that is supposed to be the custodian of her career. A trust that once shattered may never be fully repaired. This chain of negligence doesn't just start and end with that one game in Seattle. To truly understand how badly the Fever failed Caitlin Clark, you have to rewind the clock by 1 month, because this wasn't one isolated event. It was a slow-motion disaster that the team should have seen coming from a mile away. On May 26th, Clark was diagnosed with a left quadriceps strain, It was the first significant injury of her career, sidelining her for 5 games over a 3-week period. This is the original sin in this entire saga, a serious muscle injury to her left leg. When she returned on June 14th, she did so in spectacular fashion, dropping a season-high 32 points. To the outside world, it looked like a full recovery. But this triumphant return was likely a case of fool's gold. It may have masked an underlying weakness, creating a false sense of security that led directly to the catastrophe that followed. Medical experts and former athletes have pointed to a classic, predictable pattern: muscular overcompensation.
Caitlin, when did you guys find out about this groin injury, and how much of an absence do you expect from her beyond today?
Yeah, late last night. I think it's very much a day-to-day thing, how she responds to treatment. I stay in my lane and let our strength and conditioning and our physical, our AT staff do what they do best. But yeah, I found out late last night, and then we'll treat it day to day.
Back-to-back a factor at all with that?
I mean, I don't know that it's a factor from a physical standpoint, from an athletic training standpoint. Certainly in my mind, it is. But at the same time, she's shown that she's tough and she's a quick healer. So we'll see.
Was it something she reported yesterday, like pain in the left groin?
It had to have been at some point during the day, because they took her out yesterday, for the MRI. So I'm not exactly sure. I didn't hear about it until we heard from our training staff last night.
And with the MRI, did it show a strain or anything? Or
I don't. You'll have to ask our training staff. Yeah.
It's a simple concept. When a major muscle group like the quad is injured and not allowed to heal to 100% strength, the smaller surrounding muscles have to work overtime to pick up the slack. They take on stress they were never meant to handle. In this case, the muscles in her groin were almost certainly compensating for the lingering weakness in her quad, trying to stabilize her left leg during the explosive, high-torque movements of a basketball game. That non-contact injury you saw in Seattle, that sudden, desperate lunge, it wasn't a freak accident. It was the bill coming due. It was the predictable snapping point of a body that had been pushed beyond its structural limits. The groin strain wasn't a new injury. It was the direct, foreseeable consequence of the first one. The Fever weren't just ignoring the red flags of a performance slump, they were ignoring the flashing 5-alarm fire of a significant, recent injury to the exact same leg. And that isn't just a coaching error. It's a level of medical mismanagement that is simply indefensible. Now, there's a counter-argument to all of this. Some might say that Caitlin Clark is a professional athlete, and ultimately, she is responsible for her own body. That if she was in that much pain, she should have refused to play. And it's true that Clark is one of the fiercest competitors on the planet. This is an athlete who, after coming back from that first quad injury, made her own mentality perfectly clear. She said, quote, "I told them, I don't want to come back unless I'm 100% full go. Why would I be out there to play 20 minutes? I'm out there to win."
Caitlin Clark is out with groin injury. Buying it, or is it a mental break? Fans are done with Stephanie White. The honeymoon period is over. Stephanie White is not the coach the Fever need.
That is the heart of a champion. A player who will always want to be on the court, who will always believe they can push through the pain for the good of the team. But that warrior instinct, that drive, is precisely why a professional coaching and medical staff exists. It is their absolute #1 job to protect the player from themselves. It is their duty to see the bigger picture, to analyze the data, to recognize the physical warning signs that a player's competitive fire might blind them to. It is their responsibility to have the wisdom and the authority to say no for the sake of the player's long-term health. The Indiana Fever did not just fail to manage an injury, they failed to manage their player. They saw an athlete willing to run through a brick wall for the team, and instead of protecting her, they exploited that very mentality. They used her own desire to win as justification for their reckless gamble. They saw her willingness to play through pain not as a red flag, but as a green light to prioritize the team's immediate financial anxieties over her future. And that is perhaps the most profound level of this betrayal. It's one thing to make a bad basketball decision. It's another thing entirely to weaponize the very heart of a champion against her for your own benefit. It's a complete and total failure of professional duty, a failure of protection, and a failure of trust that strikes at the very core of the player-coach relationship. So where does this leave us? We have a mountain of evidence that points to one unavoidable conclusion. The Indiana Fever, panicked by the staggering financial consequences of a sidelined Caitlin Clark, made a calculated decision to risk her long-term health. They ignored a historic performance slump. They ignored the clear visual evidence of a taped and injured leg. They ignored the medical history of a prior injury to that same leg, creating a predictable chain reaction. And when it all went wrong, they fell back on a familiar playbook of vague and deceptive PR, a playbook they had just used weeks earlier. This wasn't just a mistake made in the heat of the moment. This was a betrayal of their duty to their player, and a betrayal of the trust of millions of fans. They gambled with their $370 million asset, and now they must face the consequences of a franchise-player relationship that may be broken beyond repair. But that's just our breakdown of the evidence, and we want to know what you think. Let us know in the comments. Do you believe the Fever's decision to play Caitlin Clark was just a coaching mistake, or was it a calculated financial gamble? And while you're down there, make sure you subscribe for more updates on this story and share this video